light showing that we are recording. So I want to welcome everybody to our April edition of Champions of the Employment. So today's topic is going to be on exploring those cannot talk. Today's topic is going to be on exploring those technological solutions. So we've been doing the Champions of Employment for about 4 months now. This is our 4th webinar. And Steve and I wanted to start this as a way for us to connect more with our support coordinators, to be more of a resource for the support coordination side of things. So hopefully we are achieving that with this. And of course, the feedback that you guys provide us in our surveys really helps to make sure we are delivering on that. So to get us started, we just want to do a quick poll, find out who's in the office or who's in the audience, I should say. I know there is a lot of interest around today's topic. So please let us know what your role is. Is it a support coordinator? Is it a service provider? Maybe you're a regional office employee. You are chair, provider relations team, community living quarters or community living coordinator. Maybe you work for another state office, VR, Department of Higher Education Workforce Development, or maybe our behavioral health side. Maybe you're an individual or family member, or maybe your role is something else. So poll is up. Time is ticking. So go ahead and put in your answer. Okay, I see our time is up. And the results show majority of us are support coordinators. We have a few service providers, a few regional office employees, and a few other state office employees. So welcome, glad you could join us. So as I mentioned earlier, today's topic is all about exploring those technological solutions. And when we think of technology, we think of a number of different things. So to get us in that frame of mind of thinking about technology, we have another poll question for you. So we want to know, what technology do you use regularly? Is it an alarm clock? Is it a calculator? Maybe it's an electronic calendar like Outlook has, or maybe you use electronic task list or notes, like the notepad that you find on a computer. Maybe you've got a smartphone and you use the apps on your smartphone regularly. Maybe you use a headphone or music to kind of help you focus your attention. So time's already ticking. Poll is up. You got 1 minute and 30 seconds to let us know what technology you use regularly. And you can check all that apply. Okay, it looks like the poll has ended, and it looks like we had a little glitch, and that some people were only able to select one answer. So again, we apologize for that. But hey, technology, we're in the right webinar, right? So it seems like majority of us have smartphones that we use on a regular basis. It also looks like we've had a handful of other people say that they use an electronic calendar or that they use headphones and music. So thank you for taking time to complete that survey. Um, so we have David Baker from the Missouri Assistive Technology, who is going to be here to talk about all things technology. I think he has some tips for us. He also would like to show us how to navigate his website and access the loan program. So lots of good information. He's also going to talk about a few apps that people might be interested in. So excited to get out of the way and let David talk here. But of course, we couldn't be complete without another survey. So for this survey, we want to know, how much do you know about Missouri Assistive Technology? Do you know a lot about it? Do you know it exists, but you haven't really used it? Or do you not know anything about it? We also want to know if you've accessed it. So take a moment to look at that and answer those questions. All right, looks like we are done. And it kind of looks like things are a bit evenly distributed. Uh, it looks like maybe a third have said that they know about it and have used it. Slightly a little more know about it but haven't used it. And then we have about a third that say, hey, I know it exists, but I don't know any details and have not used it. So thank you all for taking a moment to complete our survey. Oh, and we have yet another poll question that I forgot about. Okay, we're on a poll roll here today. So part of when we're thinking about technology, we want to know, does your agency consider technology as part of the employment process? So we're looking at that intersection between employment and technology, and if you utilize both in that employment process. So yes, no, or don't know. Okay, and the results are, it looks like a majority of people have said yes, their agency considers technology as part of that employment process. So that is really great to hear. A few people said no, and a few people said don't know. So hopefully this will spark some conversations in your organization. So now moving forward, I want to step out of the way and let David take over. So David,
All
the
right.
floor is yours.
Okay, I'm having some interesting technical issues here. Heike, I don't know if you have the ability. There's like 3 versions of me up there. And if we can, I'm going to get some feedback here if we don't make a couple versions of me disappear. I've always wanted to clone myself, but. All right. I'll just try to go ahead here, and hopefully you're not getting any feedback. I have a little here in my office. Okay, so thank you very much. I thank you for the poll questions as well. Oh, crap.
David, I think we've lost you altogether now.
Yeah, am I back on?
Yes, we can hear you again.
This is some really, okay, I just got to get this mouse away from me. It seems to be throwing me for a loop here today since it's not my mouse. Okay, well, actually, wonderful to be here, and I'm extremely glad to talk to you all about assistive technology today. And I found some of the answers about how many of you were familiar with Missouri assistive technology to be very interesting. I'm glad some of you are. Some of you who are familiar with us but maybe haven't used us, hopefully we can change that at some point in time. And for those of you who are not familiar with us, if we can hopefully have some way to make a relationship after this, I think that would be beneficial for all of us, especially for the folks that you're working with. So on the screen right now is a definition of what, or actually 4 versions of what assistive technology is. And in the first 3 boxes on the top are kind of some formal definitions that I've kind of collected as time has gone on. And the one in the blue box on the left-hand side is actually the definition that you see in a lot of federal legislation. And if you read that, it gets a little bit hard to understand exactly what isn't considered assistive technology. So if you focus in on the black box on the bottom that has the red lettering, then what you will see is that there's a definition there that says assistive technology is whatever I need to get the job done. And that's the simplest way to think about assistive technology. It's just all the tools that are out there for people with disabilities to enable them to address a barrier to get something accomplished in their life. So in a job setting, assistive technology is going to be whatever somebody needs to get the job done and to be an effective employee. So if we move on to the next slide, we'll also talk a little bit more on this slide about just what assistive technology is. And because we all kind of have a view of what assistive technology is in our minds. Maybe we think about it as being medical equipment, or maybe some kind of standalone device, or some device that's designed especially for people with disabilities in mind. But over the course of the last 10 years or so, the world of assistive technology has gotten considerably broader, and there's a variety of reasons to do that, or that has happened. And part of the reason that this has happened is because we've moved from just traditional assistive technology to mainstream technology becoming a very important part of the assistive technology arena. Probably the most significant example of this is the iPad on the right-hand side there, that as they have, when they came out with the iPad, and as they've built new models of the iPad over the years, one of the things they've done, which has been a dream in the world of assistive technology for a lot of years, is they've built in a bunch of accessibility features, which means that it is equally as accessible to me as a person with a disability as it is to somebody who does not have a disability the minute that I open the box. So we're talking about literally thousands of different devices here, and it can get really overwhelming really quick. And we still have lots of what we'd refer to as traditional assistive technology, but we have all these new pieces of mainstream technology that we put under this umbrella as well. So the point there is not to overwhelm you, but really to help you understand that it is an amazing array of devices that are out there that can help just about every person with a disability be able to achieve something they otherwise wouldn't be able to do. So let's move on to the next slide. And one of the things that we always really put an emphasis on at Missouri Assistive Technology whenever we're talking to people about technology is let's start simple. Let's start at the low end of the technology spectrum, and that's what you're seeing illustrated on the slide. We kind of divide the world of assistive technology into 4 categories of devices. No-tech devices, which are ready to use. They're generally affordable. They're just generally simple modifications that can enable somebody to address a barrier. Low-tech devices, which are not at all sophisticated. There's not a lot of training. A lot of times, maybe they just have batteries in them. There's not a lot of complex aspects to them. And then mid-tech, which is kind of somewhere between the low and the light tech, might be a little more complex, might require a little bit more training. And then high-tech, which generally involve a lot of training and generally tend to be computer-based. It's really easy for us to get caught up in the world of the high-tech devices. And what I mean by that is we all think that the thing that has the most bells and whistles is going to be the object that is going to work best for somebody. But we strongly encourage, if you're ever doing anything with assistive technology, that you start over there on the left-hand side and explore devices that are either no-tech or low-tech and see whether or not they're able to help that person that is addressing a barrier and trying to use technology to do so. So let's move on to the next slide here, Sandy. There are lots of different ways to slice the world of assistive technology, and there are lots of things you can find online there that talk about various types of categories of assistive technology. And when I got to thinking about this, when Sandy reached out to me and asked me to do this little presentation here today, I thought that these were the 5 areas in the employment setting that probably are going to be the categories of assistive technology that you might want to most focus in on. There are probably 12 or 15 different categories of assistive that I think in a workplace are most likely to be able to address somebody's needs. All right, all right. And hopefully that took care of the problems in the chat there. Okay, so the 5 categories of assistive technology are executive function, mobility, sensory, communication, reading and writing. I think that these are probably going to be the areas of assistive technology that, like I said earlier, are most often going to be the areas that should be the focus or the needs that are going to be most in line with the folks that you're dealing with. So let's move on to the next slide. So we've looked at assistive technology. We want to start at the low end of the technology scale, build our way up. We've looked at some of the more common categories of technology that we might find ourselves needing to explore within the world of employment. And now we kind of need to put in place a rule. Because they often say that if you don't plan ahead, or shoot, I can't remember how that goes, but you got to have a plan. Because the last thing that you want to do is put a piece of assistive technology in front of somebody and expect that it is automatically going to do wonders for them. It takes some thought, it takes some pre-planning, it takes some action after the device has been given to somebody. So you kind of got to have a game plan in order to really make sure that you've matched somebody up with the right piece of technology, they're able to use it, and then once they have it, that they understand it and kind of maximize all the potential that is in that piece of assistive technology. So let's move on to the next slide. So in school districts, there is a system that they use, a lot of school districts use, and it is called the SET, which stands for Student Environment Task and Tool. And when I look at the SET, which is used in school districts, I think it's really easy to apply that same idea to the employment arena as well. And so I kind of stole, with my apologies to a woman by the name of Joey Zabala, and sort of renamed it for the employment environment as the ET. So if we are starting to work with somebody and we are beginning to explore assistive technology for that person in the workforce, then we need to kind of break our process into 4 steps. The first one is the employee. Dealing with what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, what are their interests, kind of what's their personality. The second one is the environment. Where is it that they are working and what are some of the features of that environment? And then the third thing we need to look at are the tasks that they're going to be responsible for. So what are the measurable things on their job that they need to be able to maximize and be able to do to be an effective employee? So the very last thing that we're going to look at when we begin kind of making a plan for addressing assistive technology needs with somebody is the actual tool or the assistive technology itself. Start with understanding who the employee is, where they're working, what the environment's like, what the tasks that they need to accomplish are, and then we can stop and start thinking about the piece of assistive technology or the tool that's going to be most effective for them. So let's move on to the next slide. And this is just a fictional individual. Well, not so fictional. It is actually based on somebody that I know. And this is kind of just a real quick example of how we might use the sort of the plan that I just kind of overviewed for all of you. So who's the employee? In this case, it's a young man by the name of Aaron. And we know that he's an incredibly enthusiastic individual and he has great attention to detail, but he struggles with reading instructions and retaining information. But I've also observed that if I provide information to him in an auditory format, like via speech, that he's able to retain that information much better and understand things much more clearly if I'm talking to him as opposed to having him read some kind of instructions. He also has a lot of difficulty with keeping his papers organized. So if I give him papers and I tell him to hang on to them, he's probably going to struggle with that. Notice that he has an iPhone and he's very knowledgeable about that iPhone and how to use it. So these are just some of the details, some of the things about Aaron that I want to take into consideration as I am considering some kind of technology for him. So where does Aaron work? Aaron works in a large box store, actually it's a warehouse, and he doesn't have a lot of interaction with his supervisor. So maybe once or twice a day he crosses paths with a supervisor, but he pretty much works independently. And the other thing that Aaron has pointed out to me is that the place that he works is extremely noisy. There's a lot of overhead noise through the intercom system. There's a lot of people moving around. There's machinery being used. So it tends to be a really, really noisy environment. And when he's at his job, in his environment, the tasks in the bottom left-hand corner there, the tasks that Aaron is responsible for performing include that he's supposed to read and comprehend the instructions related to what he's supposed to be stocking on those shelves. And generally that's been given to him in some kind of print format, and we might remember that that's something that is not exactly the best way to deliver information to Aaron. He's also supposed to communicate with his coworkers and his supervisors about his progress. Sort of, if I remember correctly, 2 or 3 times a day, he kind of checks in and tells them where he's at with his list of things that he was supposed to do that day. And then he also, as part of his daily requirement, is supposed to verify or actually a weekly requirement, is supposed to verify and sign his timesheet. So those are the primary tasks that Aaron has in front of him on a daily and a weekly basis. So now I know something about Aaron. I know what his strengths are. I know what some of his weaknesses are. I know where he works and some of the factors in that environment. And I now know exactly what it is that he's supposed to accomplish. So since we want to make him a great employee, we need to turn our attention to the tools. And that's where I would start my exploration of assistive technology. And I often say that assistive technology is 10% known the devices, it's 90% creativity. And this is, in these 2 solutions here that might work to help Aaron in particular overcome his reading struggles. The first might be that he takes a picture of what the aisles are and he has it on that smartphone or that iPhone that he's very familiar with, so he can consult the pictures and match things up so that they are effective for him. For those pieces of print text that Aaron has been given, or those emails that he gets related to his job, then I think we would want to look, because we know through our conversation with Aaron that he retains information if he hears it better than if he reads it, that we might also want to look at some text-to-speech software that would read the instructions, would read the emails, would read the memos that he's given. So he can kind of use built-in mainstream technology in the form of the camera on the iPhone to take pictures of the aisles or take pictures of the materials that are provided to him, so he can do his put stuff where it's supposed to be. And then we might look at some kind of standalone app or other piece of technology that would be able to deliver the text-to-speech feature so that he could have materials read to him so he can understand them better. All right, so let's move on to we've kind of looked at the ET, which I think would be a great philosophy or a great way to look at each of the individuals you're working with and kind of standardize how you approach assistive technology. Because one of the things about assistive technology is that it is not one size fits all. Everybody is different. And so what might have been effective for the first person you worked with may not be effective for the second. So I kind of have some philosophies about the world of assistive technology after spending about 30 years in it. The first one is that we make this harder than it needs to be. It's not like we all have this built-in understanding of all the devices that are out there, and maybe some are a little afraid of technology. Maybe some of the technology we refer to as assistive technology is not something we're familiar with, or maybe it's the first time we've seen it. But don't let that sort of intimidate you. Just relax and kind of figure it out. And I will tell you right out of the chute that you're probably going to mess something up, and that's okay because you learn from those types of things. I said a second ago or a minute ago that assistive technology is 10% knowledge of devices, it's 90% creativity. So let's go back to our example of Aaron and the text-to-speech. Knowing that there's something out there that can take print text and convert it into an auditory format so that an individual can listen to it, that's the 10%. That's the knowledge of the devices. And the 90% creativity part is, where am I going to use that? And how are we going to make Aaron be motivated to want to use it, to be able to get that information so that he can independently do the job? Another sort of philosophy of mine is, the world of technology and assistive technology changes. It changes constantly. And if we don't all conscientiously sort of make some time to learn the types of tools that are out there, and our website might be a great place to start exploring devices, then we're not going to get ahead of the curve. So you kind of got to figure out how to work in time to learn about assistive technology. I know I do it. I carve out, even though I do this stuff day in, day out, unless I carve in time to learn about new devices that are coming out or new ways to apply them, then I'm not staying current. And so I even have to make time to learn on a daily and weekly basis. And the easiest way to learn are YouTube and Twitter are your two best friends in the world of assistive technology. So let's go back to that text-to-speech example, or in a minute here, I'm going to actually look at a couple, or point out a couple of apps that you might begin exploring assistive technology. There are people who have far more time on their hands than I will ever have, and they love to post stuff to Twitter and YouTube. And there's probably not a piece of assistive technology that I have ever come across where I can't find an example of how it works on YouTube. And a lot of times they're done by the actual users themselves. A lot of times they're done by the companies. But in a couple of minutes, I can get a real sense for what some piece of assistive technology does, and that can just start my wheels rolling on how I might use it with an individual. So YouTube and Twitter, if you come back to the office and you're on YouTube and your boss catches you on YouTube, you can say, hey, I'm doing one of David Baker's philosophies of AT, and I'm taking some time to learn about assistive technology so I can be a better employee. Ignorance is not bliss in the world of technology or in assistive technology. And what I mean by that is, some of us are Android people, some of us are Apple people, and we may not be familiar with Apple, and we may not want to use it as a piece of technology because we're not familiar with it. In this day and age, we all have to have some familiarity with technology. So we need to get comfortable with it and not stay away from it. And we can't use I don't know as an example because we need to be on top of this. So overall, though, just relax. This technology is not that hard. Even though I've done it for a lot of years, it can generally be fun because there are some really, really cool tools out there. And then finally, this is what we do day in, day out at Missouri Assistive Technology is we work with various devices. We try to stay on top of all the devices that come out there. So if you're exploring and you get stuck or you just want ideas, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the resources on our website, just call us. This is what we are here for. And I bet 80% of all my contacts or calls from people start with, I have this situation, I have this individual that I know, something of that nature. So if we can move on to the next slide. And I saw some stuff coming up in the chat. I don't know if we want to take a brief minute to address those. I know, and I apologize, I'm having some really strange computer issues on this particular day. Hopefully people can hear me. I'm trying to adjust accordingly as I see stuff pop up into the chat window there. This is interesting to me. Okay.
So David, one of the questions that we had in the chat box, one of the attendees wanted to know if you had any recommendations about specific text-to-speech apps.
Okay. Yeah, hold on. I'm actually going to address that with one of my slides here in a second. So I'll come back to that. And if you need additional information, pop something in at that point. Heike, you put something in that I think was an instruction for me, something to do. So hopefully my technology can be a little more, work a little more effectively here today. Let's see it.
I think it was one of.
No, we've had a couple folks, actually several folks, ask if you'll disconnect and reconnect. From my side, if I'm down to 2 of you that are unmuted, but regardless of which one I mute, I totally shut you off. So from my side, you go along really well without any audio hiccups, but when they hit, it's really gurgly. So that was what I put in the chat box. Was it somebody wanted to know if you would reconnect?
Okay. Actually, if everybody wants to take a 2-minute break, back out and come back in real quick.
Okay.
Not even a 2-minute break, a 30-second break.
We can do that.
Okay. You're right back on.
And while we're giving David some time to kind of see if his trick will resolve the issue, I really encourage you guys to put something in the chat box. Is there, something that you're wanting David to really touch on? Maybe something he said has sparked an interest and you're like, hey, I'd really love for David to expand on that. So take a moment and let us know what your thoughts are that you'd like to see David talk about.
And do not send those to the host. Those come to me only, and no one else can see those. So if possible, share those with, at a minimum, all panelists.
All right. Whoa, look at that. Everything all cleaned up. Okay, nice. So let's go back to David Baker's philosophy of assistive technology. I just took the time to learn. I just discovered a new potential problem with using WebEx, and I just figured out how to get my way out of it. So, even those of us who do this stuff day in, day out, every now and then, man, there's something that throws us for a loop. Okay, hopefully all my sound is better now. All right, turn on my speaker there a little bit in case somebody says something, because before I was getting some feedback, and I bet all of you don't want that. Okay, so what do we have up here on the screen right now? One of the areas that I imagine that, well, actually this applies to all of us, so this probably applies not only to the folks you work with, but many of us. There's been a lot of discussion over the last couple of years about something called executive functions. which are essentially those pieces. Think of executive function as like an orchestra. And if an orchestra is not following the conductor, and the conductor would be our brain, then things kind of fall apart. And so that's kind of a very nutshell version of what they mean when they talk about executive function. And a lot of times, employees and ourselves struggle with various areas of executive function. And on the right hand or on the left hand side of the slide that's up there, there are some domains related to executive function. So focus, organization, planning and prioritizing, cognitive flexibility. Those are some of the domains or ways that we break down this big topic of executive function. And then on the right side, are some of the sort of the traits of people that might be of those particular domains, and some of the problems that people might be having if that particular domain is not one of their strong points. So let's use focus as our example here. That's one of the domains. It's obviously a very important piece of being able to be an effective employee. And so we probably all know people who on the job have a hard time sustaining their attention, or shifting from one area of focus to another, or blocking out sounds in the environment so that they can stay focused and do their task. And planning and prioritizing, which is another domain. Again, we probably, including ourselves, are well aware that there are those folks out there that prioritizing and sequencing the various tasks necessary to achieve a goal isn't their strong suit. And 5 years ago, if we had tried to figure out some assistive technology for this, it would have not been that easy to do because of the fact that we were still dealing with a lot of standalone devices. So over the last 3, 4, 5 years, there's been a lot of really interesting devices that have come out to help people who struggle with executive function. And we have a little work group that Sandy and Stephen and some other folks are involved in, and this is one of the areas that we've kind of done some experimenting with a couple of locations around the state on these executive function apps that are out there. And I just want to introduce you to like 3 or 4 of these real quick and kind of walk through them. And part of the reason that I picked executive function, we could do like a whole nother webinar on just executive function and the types of tools that are available for it. But these are, not only is this a common thing that you see across a lot of folks, but it's also really important building steps to being a successful employee. Sometimes people will also kind of refer to these a little bit as soft skills, or put them in that category as well. So if we move the slide, I'll walk you through a few here. And again, a lot of these are free or inexpensive, and they're great kind of entering points if you want to kind of start exploring assistive technology just personally or with somebody that you know. And the first 2 apps that are up there that I've illustrated, and keep in mind, there are dozens of other options for these executive function apps. I'm not singling these out as the best that are out there. These are just 2 that I have a lot of experience with and just want to use as examples. So we have a lot of folks who focus is a problem, and they have this category of apps out there that they refer to as self-regulation apps. And we have, let's go back to Aaron, our example from a little bit earlier. And one of the things that was a problem for Aaron is the fact that he works in a noisy environment. There's lots of overhead noise. There's lots of noise on the floor around him. His attention is constantly diverted. And so he's experimented with using white noise, which is, sort of like, well, it's not ambient sound, I guess, technically speaking. But white noise is this whole spectrum of sort of low, soft tones that are very effective for helping people do things like sleep or block out distractions or those types of things. So when he is able, Aaron turns on and getting distracted by everything that's around him, Aaron will put in his earbuds and he will turn on this white noise app, and it helps him with his focus. It stops him from just sort of knee-jerkingly turning every time that he hears a sound around him. And so as a result, when he's able to do that, his productivity for the day has increased. He also has a tendency to get anxious as time goes on. And, a lot of times, maybe that anxiety that he's feeling or that sort of uncomfort that is beginning to build up in him is a result of all that noise that's around. And so one of the things that he does is he uses an app called Calm Counter. And it's an amazingly simple app. And when I first saw it, I thought it was ridiculous, but it is pretty effective. What it does is he will step aside when he begins to feel himself getting slightly agitated. He will step aside, he will open this app on his iPhone, and what it does is it literally counts down from 10 through a series of breathing exercises and these little animated faces. So he just takes a deep breath, and the first one at 10 is like this red face that has perspiration coming out of it, like it's kind of, or smoke coming out of it. And that's kind of how he feels at that point. And then he goes down to 9, 10, or 9, 8, 7, down all the way to 0. He just takes deep breaths as he's going through this app, and sort of the comically amusing picture that goes with each of the countdowns also kind of signals a certain way that he's beginning to feel or should feel at that point. So very simple little app, but it helps him self-regulate. If we move on to the next slide, this is a couple of apps in the area of managing effort. Time is a real, understanding time, making it concrete and not just an abstract idea is a real struggle for a lot of folks. And I personally do a lot with these visual and auditory timers. I'm somebody who is easily distracted or finds it a little hard to be motivated at certain times. And so I've gone to using these a lot where I have a situation where I need some motivation and I say, hey, you know what? I'm going to turn on my clock app and I'm going to set it for 30 minutes and I'm going to work on this project for 30 minutes. And it's amazing how quickly one locks in and starts attending to something when you kind of start using these visual and auditory timers as sort of motivators. So these are really, the first one over there on the right is an app, and it's called Time Timer. And I think it's maybe about $4 in the App Store. There's an equivalent of it in the Android store, the Google Play Store. And one of the reasons that I like this is it's very visual. So I don't have to really even know how to tell time, but I could set it for 60 minutes and I'm supposed to take a break at 60 minutes. So I can visually see as the red becomes smaller and the white section becomes larger, that how much time I have left before I'm supposed to take my break. Or maybe I use it to get me motivated in the morning. I'll give a good hour of effort and I'll turn it on and I'll just watch that go all the way to white and I'll be able to say, hey, I got off to a good start today. It's also useful for transitioning. Sometimes it's very difficult for people who have multiple tasks that they do through their day to transition from one task to the other. They lose track of time. So I might use this and say I'm supposed to work in this area of the warehouse for an hour, go somewhere else in the warehouse after that hour is over. Then I might just turn this on, consult it every now and then, and know when it is that I'm supposed to move over and transition. So lots of different ways that these can be used. You can either go out and buy like the Time Timer app, which I've already talked about, which is visual. But I said earlier that one of the great things about the world of assistive technology is there's a lot of mainstream technology that we have been effectively using as assistive technology for a number of years now, because they build things in that function as assistive technology. The clock app that is in all the iOSs of all the Apple products is a perfect example of this. So if you're not overly familiar with all the neat little things it can do as a timer, as a clock, as a stopwatch, you might get a little bit familiar with those because it's very visual, it's very easy to follow. And one of the things that I think is funny, to go back to Aaron, is he's actually figured out that he can turn on the clock app, set it as a timer, and he's figured out that he can make that timer also turn off the white noise app after 60 minutes. And so he's getting this double whammy of paying attention so he can move on to the next task or end his day or what have you. So that's just an example of sort of the creativity that you can do with these things. All right, let's move on to the next slide here. And just, I'm beginning to kind of run a little bit out of time here. But another area that's a real struggle for a lot of folks is memory management. Keeping track of what their tasks are, keeping organized, all those types of things. And so the Notes app that's built into the iOS devices is, again, another great tool that's right under our noses that can be used in a lot of creative ways. You know, the employee themselves can utilize it to take notes throughout the day. They can either type those in or they can voice them in if they're in an area that they can connect to Wi-Fi. They can take pictures and drop it in a note. You know, so again, creativity is the key here. But they can set up their entire day in a notes app and and then like email their any questions they have for a case manager or something using the Notes app. So lots of different ways it can be used. A free app, or not a free app, a paid app that's out there that does something similar and has a few more bells and whistles that might be useful for folks is one called Notability. And but you can combine pictures, you can do voice input, you can use some of the text-to-speech features I've talked about. Lots of different ways these can be used to help people stay on top of what it is that they need to do when they need to do it. And there are multiple ways that they can interact with them so that they are effective for them, so they can do what they need when they need to do it. All right, so now we'll turn, you can go on to the next slide, Sandy. Let's talk a little about the text-to-speech things that are out there. And I want to introduce you to 4 options in all. And again, this is the tip of the iceberg, but these are sort of 4 getting started to more robust options that are out there. There are a lot of struggling readers and writers in this world. There are some really nice tools built into the Apple operating system. And if you are not familiar with where they are built in and want to get more familiar, YouTube is your best friend, for instance. Google is your best friend. There's some great resources out there to get you started. But if you are familiar with your settings app, which comes on all your iOS devices, also comes on your Android devices, in both instances, there is something called accessibility built in, and you can find it in the settings, and you will find this whole slew of these built-in features. So 2 that are built in to the Apple operating system. The first one is called Speak Selection. And they've kind of made this a little bit better over the years. It used to be a little bit hard to find, but now they've sort of made it stick out when you're in the accessibility features. And what it does is it enables me to do 2 things. There's 2 ways I can use it. On the example that's up there on the screen, if I just have a sentence or a paragraph or a word that I'm not familiar with and I want it spoken to me, I could just highlight it and I could take those 2 sort of sticks with balls on them and pull those out and highlight a certain area that I want read back. So I do that, touch it, it reads that information back to me. There's another version of Speak Selection that I can turn on in my settings app of my Apple device. And it is called full screen, where I literally just pull down, I get to where I want to go, I need that read back to me, I pull down with 2 fingers from the top and it'll read everything that's on that page. These aren't perfect, but they're great starting apps or starting tools to be familiar with, just to see if that's an effective tool for somebody, but also for those folks that have some reading, have some literacy, but may not necessarily be the strongest. A lot of times on the right-hand side is something called Safari Reader. They've kind of, in my opinion, sort of made this a little more difficult to access than it should be because it's wonderful. If you have people that are, this applies most for people that are doing something that is online, like looking for a job or something like that. But a lot of times there's lots of ancillary content on a web page. And that can be very distracting for people. What Safari Reader does, it enables me to block all that stuff out so that I could just stay focused on what it is that I need to get out of that web page. And I could use Safari Reader in conjunction with the Speak Select, clean up all the clutter, get it read to me. It's a much more effective tool, perhaps, for my particular needs. We move on to the next slide. All right, so this is an example of a text-to-speech app that's out there. And there are several of them. There's Kurzweil, or not Kurzweil. There's Read and Write. There's some free ones that are escaping. The names of them are escaping me right now. This is one I like called Voice Dream Reader. And what it does is it will take any text. So it could be a website, it could be a Google Doc, it could be an email, all those different ways that we communicate in a digital format. And I open it up, I access what I need, and it will read that content back to me. It will also do, there are a number of different ways I can manipulate it. I can make the text more spaced out. I can make the text larger. I can customize it, in other words, is what I'm trying to say. But one of the key features in here is something called synchronized highlighting. For those people that maybe have some literacy and they're able to get content and stay focused more as they're hearing something read back to them if the word that is being spoken can be highlighted at the same time. So it's incredibly flexible in all the different ways that it can be used. And like I said, it interfaces with a lot of different things that are out there, email, Google Docs, Word docs, et cetera, et cetera. It might, in some instances, be considered to be a little pricey since it's about $20, but it is a great $20 with all the ways that it can be used and all the ways that it can prevent people from misunderstanding things if they're good at being auditory absorbers of information, but not necessarily good with print text. All right, so one more of these text-to-speech apps, and this is what it's called a scan and read app. This one is that I have ago, $10. Again, there's several of these that are out there on the market, but you have in a workplace a lot of print text that's put out there, maybe a memo, maybe a list of tasks that somebody's supposed to do in a particular day. And again, reading is not necessarily their strongest skill set. And with a scan and read app, what I can do is I can open it up on my phone. I line up that piece of information that piece of print text. I literally take a picture of it. It instantly converts it through what's known as OCR software into an auditory format so that I can hear it. It is amazing what the accuracy is on this. It is probably about 99% accurate. Unfortunately, it doesn't read handwriting. It kind of can a little bit, but it's generally for something that's typed. But it's an incredibly effective tool for somebody who just needs to quickly get a piece of information and understand it so that they can go on and do what it is that they're supposed to do. So we looked at the built-in tools for struggling readers. We looked at an example with Voice Dream Reader of what I refer to as a text-to-speech app, and then Prismo Go is an example of scan and read. So the point, I know we're going through this quickly, but the point here is there are lots of different examples, and some of these might work a little bit better for some folks. So always keep in mind that there's sort of this series of options that are out there. And if you try something and it doesn't quite do it, then you go back and you try something else. And there's, like I said, multiple options. Okay, so let's, in the name of time here, oh, there was a question from Tom. If there was, I'm sorry, I didn't hear it or I didn't see it.
David, I just asked if he answered your question, or if you answered his question. So it was about, what you recommend for those text-to-speech apps. So I want to make sure that Tom felt like he got his question answered.
All right. Well, I will answer it a little bit more when we go to talk about the ETC loan library here. So for those of you that are familiar with us, hopefully you know our website's at.mo.gov. Those that aren't, please take some time to visit our website and learn about the various programs we have. And there's some of them are illustrated over there on the right-hand side. Some of this might be applicable to folks that you're working with. We have our adapted internet program that provides computer access devices. We have the adapted phone programs. We're going to talk a little bit more about the loan program. We also have a financial loan program. So that might be something to get more familiar with if you have somebody that needs hearing aids for the job or something of that nature, or needs some kind of piece of technology. We have microloans available through that, and those are kind of designed with employment opportunities in mind. And of course, we do lots of information and guidance on issues around assistive technology. But we want to dwell in a little bit or dig in a little bit on the next slide, which is the loan program. And if you are not familiar with this is, we refer to it as ETC, long story as to where that name came from. Maybe someday we'll push that name out of existence and just refer to it as the Device Loan Program, but not today. Okay, so what ETC is it is a free short-term device loan program. It is like a library of assistive technology. So it is an opportunity for people to borrow for free. We even pay the cost of the shipping to you and back to us, and explore assistive technology. Predominantly, it's going to be used to explore various devices with individuals that you might be working with, but we strongly encourage folks to get familiar with technology by just borrowing it on their own behalf to become more familiar with maybe some of the apps that I covered a little bit earlier. So if you go to the website, you will see the first thing that you need to do is you need to sign up to be a borrowing agency, and the actual agency agreement form is there, and you can print it out. You can email it back to us. If you're not familiar, just send us an email. We'll look you up. You know, people change in agencies, and sometimes somebody signed up already and other people in the agency don't know. And then you can do the actual requests online, and I'll let you all figure that out as time goes on. It should be fairly straightforward. But what I want to really draw your attention to is over there on the right-hand side is a list of all the categories of AT that we have available. Not only is this useful for borrowing things out of ETC, this is also really useful as a tool for getting familiar with the types of assistive technologies that are out there in different categories. So maybe you're working with someone that has a hearing impairment, but you're not overly familiar with assistive technology for those types of situations. You could go into our ETC catalog, you could scan through and see all the types of devices with little brief descriptions and then links out to the actual company that makes it about the various kinds of assistive technology that are out there. So to circle back to Tom's original question about text-to-speech apps, there is one of the things that we do send out a lot of are iPads that we preload with various types of apps that people might want to explore. And so one of the catalogs is an entire overview of all the apps that are available for downloading onto an iPad and sending out to individuals. So Tom, you might want to become more familiar with some of the other text-to-speech apps, and there are about 4 or 5 of them that are available for exploration through an iPad that we would loan out to you in ETC, and you can become more familiar with them by kind of reading their brief descriptions, which would be in the catalog that is online there and can be accessed on the right-hand side through the link. So, okay, that is kind of the highlight on ETC. You know, it's pretty simple. The key thing is just think of it as a library. We pay the cost of sending it out and having it shipped back. Great resource over there with the catalogs, and it's all done. All the requests are made online, and you just go down and you select the devices, and it does something called a WUFU, and we send it out to you. You know, one of the things I've kind of tried to make a little bit of a competition out of ETC here because a lot of school districts borrow out of this like crazy. They're like 80% of all the borrowers. I would like it to be 40% borrowers from schools, 40% from employers at some point in time. You know, it's a great resource, and we hope that you'll use it and get more familiar with it. All right, so the last slide is just a reminder.
Before you move on, so, you know, again, just making sure that everybody is aware of this. So you had mentioned that when agencies are borrowing equipment, you guys ship them out, so there's no cost to the agency. You guys get them for a full 5 weeks, correct?
Oh, yeah.
So you get them for a full 5 weeks, and then again, you ship back at the end of the 5 weeks on Missouri assistive technology costs, no cost to you. But you recently kind of let it drop that if that's not enough time, you can submit another application and get that device right back again.
That's right. Yeah. If you borrow at ETC and you want to do the super secret way to get around that 5-week loan thing, you just call me, and then my staff beats me silly when I share that with people. But that's a whole nother conversation. So yeah, no, you're exactly right. And, you know, we're constantly adjusting that inventory. Right now it's a little bit, because school districts are such heavy borrowers, it's a little more skewed towards school districts. But if we get a lot more people who are doing employment borrowing out of that, we'll adjust the inventory to have more options for that environment as well. All right, so again, our website, at.mo.gov, and I'm David Baker. I'm the director here at Missouri Assistive Technology. And even though we're located in Blue Springs, we are responsible for serving the entire state of Missouri. And so hopefully this will lead a few of you to reach out to us or to reach out to me, and we can find ways to increase knowledge and application of assistive technology in workforces. We seem to have lost Sandy. So until Sandy comes back, I tried to make up for these strange technological problems I had earlier on. Hopefully I did. I apologize for those. Like I said, even those of us who work in this stuff day in, day out, man, there's always something. So thanks for your time.
All right, thanks a lot, Dave, for all that information. I think it's been very helpful, I hope, for everybody listening in. So the next slide shows the save the dates for other dates that we have for Champions of Employment webinars. They're all on the second Wednesday of each month from 1:30 to 2:30. So the next one will be May the 12th. Then another one, June the 9th, and then July the 14th. So hopefully you guys will be able to participate in those. Hot topics. We have a 4-part webinar series on benefits and employment, which is the second Tuesday of each month starting at 2 p.m. So we've already had one for March and April. Yesterday was one for April the 13th. Then we have another one coming up on May the 11th, which is a live benefits case study. And then another one on June the 8th, cultivating a pro-employment culture regarding benefits. And then down at the bottom, it has where you can register for those. So hopefully some of you guys will be able to participate in those. And don't forget to do the survey questions. That's very important. It helps us to see things that we may need to be doing better or different. So please do that. We need your feedback to help us. So please do that. And for you to get in contact with Sandy or myself, for Sandy Kaiser, which is Keyser, and her phone number is 636-926-1229. And her email address is sandy.kaiser@dmh.mo.gov. And she serves the following areas: St. Louis County Regional Office, St. Louis Tri-County Regional Office, Hannibal Satellite Office, Kirkville Satellite Office, Poplar Bluff Satellite Office, Rolla Satellite Office, and Sykeston Regional Office. And then my information is Stephen Taylor. My phone number is 816-889-6920. And my email address is stephen.taylor@dmh.mo.gov. And I serve Albany Satellite Office, the Kansas City Regional Office, Central Missouri Regional Office, and Springfield Regional Office, and the Joplin Satellite Office. So if you need to get in contact with either one of those, either one of us, those are the contact information. So feel free to contact us anytime if you need help. And we thank you for listening in today, and hopefully you will be joining us for our next one next month. And thank you very much.
So again, thank you, everybody. We are sorry about the technical difficulties, but hopefully you were able to still get something out of it. We will have the recorded version available on our website later this month, along with the slideshow. So those links for registering, you should be able to see those as well. So definitely take time to fill out our survey, and we'll see you next month. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.